I have not seen a lot of networking information on the OS Fundamentals test. However, since it is here, I think we should at least talk about it a little bit. We have some devices called routers, hubs, switches, wireless access points, wireless routers, and NICs. So let's talk about them. First of all, I have a router right here. Let me get it. A very typical router. You see on the front of it, there are no ports at all. On the back of it, I've got one port here called the console port. This is what I would plug into when I want to configure this thing. And then I've got some ports here, in this case 3 ports. These 3 ports would each be a different network. And that's the point of a router. It is to move traffic from one network to another. So in this case, I would have maybe my ISP would have a line coming into this port, and then my home network might have a line coming out of this port. And so they're on separate networks. That's how a router works. A hub, I'm going to talk about switches first and then come back to hubs. I have a switch here. It's a little bit bigger than the router, and again on the front, well, the front actually has a bunch of ports on it. You can see a whole lot of ports here. And on the back is the console port that I would use for configuring this thing. And the point of this switch is, as you saw, there were only 3 ports on the router. But what if I had 20 devices? Well, I could use a switch to connect those 20 devices, and then one of these would go to the router, so that I can now plug a whole bunch of devices into one network. In other words, one port on the router. Now, a hub would look the same as the switch, except the functionality is a little bit different. We'll talk about that in a minute. But as far as the physical look, hubs and switches would look very similar. A wireless router is similar to a router. It creates networks. You would have one of these at home. So your ISP, you have a cable going to your wireless router, and so that's one network. And then all of your home devices are in another network, and those are wireless off of your wireless router. A wireless access point is a little bit different. We're going to talk about how those work in a moment. So hang on to that thought, and we'll mention the difference in a minute about that. The NIC, or the network interface card, is either a wireless or a wired port that you plug something into the back of your computer and so on in order to connect to a switch or a hub. Down at the bottom of this page, I have some diagrams. So here is from the ISP, the cloud, and this has the cable that comes to the router. So this is one network, and then off of this side is another network. So you're on your own private network here, and then the router translates between the two. We have the same thing here with a switch. Now, the difference between the hub and the switch is that the hub, whenever a device talks to another device here, all of these devices, including this router, all hear it. In the case of a switch, if 2 of these devices are talking with each other, it isolates that traffic and the rest do not hear it. So that's the primary difference between a switch and a hub. You almost never see a hub anymore. Almost everybody uses switches. We can actually, if we have enough ports on our router, we can have various networks. So here I've got one going to the ISP, another network off of this switch here, off of this router, and then another network created by this switch off of this router. So I've got 3 networks going here. These 2 networks are isolated from each other because they're on different ports on the router, which means they're on different networks. What you're seeing here is a network or wireless access point. I said that we would talk about those separately, and this is a good time for that. So a wireless access point is simply a wireless access to a wired network. And you can see here that I've got a wired network with some PCs coming off of it, and one of those wires goes to a wireless access point, so these devices can participate on this wired network. That's a wireless access point. You would see these at the library, at the school, in a hospital. There'd be a white box on the wall or on the ceiling. A wireless router is what you're likely to have at home, and it actually is a router and creates a different network. Now in this case, this did not create a different network. It's all part of this network. But in this case, we have a network just like we did with the hard router there. So those are the main devices you will see. Not likely to see a lot of questions about them, but if they do occur, at least you'll have some basis now to understand them.